Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back to another 5-Minute Stories. I'm Miss Ashley, the youth librarian at the Port Charlotte Public Library. And all throughout summer reading this summer, we are traveling the world through books and stories. And if you travel the world, you will find that any country you go to, they have stories for why the land looks the way it does, why animals behave the way they do. And I have a wonderful story to share with you from the islands of Hawaii. And it actually stars one of our favorite characters, Maui. If you're a fan of Moana, then you know Maui as a big, strong demigod, right? Well, in this story, Maui is just a little boy, and he's the youngest of 3 brothers. Now, his brothers were very, very good canoe rowers and fishers. Every single day, they would get in their outrigger canoes and they would row. Let's row together. Ready? Oh, eh, oh, eh, oh, eh. 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 And when they rowed all the way out into the ocean, they would get to their fishing grounds and they would cast their nets and cast their lines and they would catch the biggest, juiciest, most delicious fish. And they were very proud of what they did. But Maui, well, he was just a little boy, so he wasn't the best at rowing. Most of the time when he rowed, he'd end up going in a circle. He'd go, oh, eh, 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 oh, eh. Oh, eh, 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 oh, eh. And he wasn't very good at fishing either. He never caught any, no matter how hard he tried. And his brothers would, of course, tease him because that's what big brothers do. They would say, Maui, you are good for nothing. You can't row, you can't fish. You are good for nothing. And Maui would say, I'm good for something. I can surf. Watch this. Ha, 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 look at me go. I'm surfing. Ha, ha. And his brothers would say, you can't eat surf, Maui. You are good for nothing. What are you good for? And Maui had to stop and he had to think. And that is what Maui was good at. He was so good at thinking and using his imagination that if he thought hard enough, he could make magic happen. So that night, he thought and he thought and he thought and he thought and he used his imagination and he imagined a great big fish hook, big enough to pull something out of the Pacific Ocean, the biggest thing out of the Pacific Ocean that had ever been seen. And he said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. But he knew to get that fish hook, he would need the bones of something half alive and something half dead. Well, lucky for him, he had a grandmother with 1 foot in the grave. So he went to his grandma and he said, Grandma, I want to build the biggest fish hook that anyone has ever seen so that when I use it, it will be magic and it will pull something out of the Pacific Ocean, the biggest thing that anyone's ever seen, and I will be great like my brothers. And his grandmother was very supportive. Oh, Maui, I just know you're going to do that. You think of the most wonderful things. And he said, yeah, well, the thing is, Grandma, I kind of need your bones. I need the bones of someone who is half alive and half dead. And, well, your face is all beautiful on this side. And this side, it looks like a skeleton. So I was wondering if I could borrow your jawbone. And his grandmother said, oh, of course, I'm not going to need it. And she popped it off and handed it to Maui. And Maui was like, wow, thank you, Grandma. You are so cool. And he began to polish this jawbone. And he polished it and he polished it. And he used all that magic of his imagination until it was a great, big magic fish hook. And he took that magic fish hook and he went to his brothers and he said, okay, take me out in your canoes, go to the fishing grounds, and I'm going to show you something really fantastic. I'm going to pull the biggest thing out of the Pacific Ocean that you have ever seen, and you're going to be amazed. And his brothers thought, this ought to be good. All right, Maui, we'll give you one choice, but this better be good. And they got in their canoe and they started rowing. Let's row together. Oh, eh, oh, eh, oh, eh. 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 And when they got out into the fishing grounds, they said, all right, Maui, show us your stuff. And Maui looked out into the water. He said, "Now, I don't know. This may not be the right place." And he took a kukui nut, which was full of oil, and he popped it into his mouth. And he chewed it for a while, filling his mouth with oil. And when his mouth was full, he spit it into the water. And when he did that, the oil created a window in the water so he could look down to see what was underneath. And he said, "This isn't the right spot. Keep going." And so they rowed again. Ready? Oh, eh, oh, eh, oh, eh. 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 And they rowed even farther out into the ocean to another fishing spot. And they said, "All right, Maui, this is the best fishing spot out here in the Pacific Ocean. You better show us your stuff, and it better be good." And so he took another kukui nut, put it in his mouth, and spit it into the water. Bing! And he looked down. He said, "Okay, this is it. This is it. Oh, you better watch. This is going to be great." Okay. And he tied a fishing line to his magic fish hook, and he swung it over his head, whoosh, 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 and threw it into the water, splash. And the hook went down, 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 down into the depths until it caught on something. And Maui said, "All right, I got to make sure it's nice and tight." And he pulled on the line, and he pulled again. Okay. I've got something. Now, I want you guys to turn around and row really fast and row really hard and don't look back. And so the brothers looked at each other and they said, "This better be good." And they began to row. Let's go. Oh, eh, oh, eh, oh, eh. 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 And while they were rowing, they didn't know that the magic fish hook had caught on the tippy tops of a mountain range underneath the waters. And as they were rowing, it began to pull those mountains up, which caused the water to swell and to rock the boat dangerously. And the boy said, "Maui, what's going on back there?" And he said, "Row faster, row harder, and don't look back." And so they did. Oh, eh, oh, eh, oh, eh. 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 And then pretty soon, the waves started to wash over the boat. And they got really scared. They said, "Maui, what's going on back there?" And he said, "Row faster, row harder, and don't look back." And so they did. Oh, eh, 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 oh, eh. Pretty soon, there was fire coming out of the earth. And it was reflected on the waters in front of them. And they were really scared. They said, "Maui, what's going on back there? What are you doing?" And he said, "Row faster, row harder, and don't look back. Oh, eh, 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 oh, eh." Ah! But they were so scared, they had to look back. And as soon as they did, bing! The fishing line broke, and the boat came to a sudden stop. Whoa! And they looked back, and they saw that Maui's magic fish hook had pulled the tops of the mountains out of the water. And if they had kept going and they didn't look back, they would have pulled the whole range out, the whole mountain range out, covered by land. But because they looked back, they only have the tippy tops of the mountains, and those form the islands of Hawaii. And now you know how Maui pulled the islands out of the water. Isn't that an awesome story? It's so much fun to tell. Woo! And that story is actually a traditional story from Hawaii. And I first heard that story told by one of my favorite storytellers, Sherry Norfolk. So if you want to hear the full story, I've shortened it a little bit because it's like a 12-minute story. Then please do find her, Sherry Norfolk, a storyteller. She tells the most wonderful stories. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you later.